GNOME.
GIF.
GNOME. GNOME.
GIF.
GNOME.
GIF. Aluminium.
In this video, we're going to specifically address a few issues that that we have with the Linux community, because since moving over to Linux, I've noticed that the community is not as accepting as possibly it should be, and I'm gonna maybe call a few people out, you know,
because Linux community not accepting of people. What? No, say it ain't so.
Here's the way I feel a lot of times in the Linux community, and it's not just G. I mean, you guys over in G, you've got your own like little club of hive-minded type things. There's some individuals over there, but by and large, I see a lot of hive-minded commenting all over the web where you just spread your elitist nonsense by ridiculing others for their choices. So you guys are kind of the hipsters of the OS world, and here's why. I need to explain to you what a hipster is, because we're going to use that in our analogy. Everyone knows what they look like and you know how they dress and what they do, and just wearing these things and doing these things does not make one a hipster. What makes one a hipster is, you know, drinking your microbrews, reading your strange books, and all that stuff as a status thing. And it's usually done so that you can judge others. You have a certain image you're going for. It's a battle for esoteria, not because necessarily you like esoteric things or you have, you know, superior taste, but it's because it is a competition. And that's why I'm calling a lot of the Linux users on the internet hipsters, because they do not do it for the purpose of functionality. They don't actually get much done other than installing a bunch of weird esoteric nonsense to make themselves superior to others so that they can go online and belittle others to make themselves feel better. So it's the whole judgmental nonsense, and that really is what defines a hipster, and that is why you guys out there who run around saying, if you're not on Gentoo, you're shitty, or if you're not using the Sabian and building things yourself, well, you're an idiot, and you should go back to your Windows and Mac, noobs. You guys are what's really, really poison. And hipster is a derogatory term. It's like the most annoying thing. If you look at like the polls of what's the most annoying thing in New York City, hipsters are like all the way at the top of the poll. And as far as community goes, what's the most annoying thing? Well, you bunch of hipsters who run around with your elitist nonsense are scaring people away, and you're all the way at the top of my list for what is the most annoying thing about Linux. Posted a picture of my GNOME desktop using Ubuntu, and one of the first comments was like, "Oh, you noob, why don't you use a real distro and use a real environment, or get off the internet?" And it was a much more colorful version, but that was like one of the first responses I got when I posted that. And of course, Ubuntu, it's the noob distro, right? And GNOME is like one of the easiest interfaces to use. But that doesn't mean I'm wrong.
GNOME has come a long way. Like, let's not even, like, people are like, "Oh, GNOME is terrible," and blah blah blah. Let's not beat around the bush here. GNOME has come an insane distance. It's like a triple triathlon or something, because it was pretty bad. And it's not that there's not improvements to be made, but they've come so far. It's crazy. And all this, like when GNOME 1 went to GNOME 2, we had all this. No one remembers, of course. And so now with GNOME 3, people are like, GNOME 2, mate, yes. It's like, well, but wait, where are the GNOME 1 people? I'm sure there are GNOME 1 people out there. So it doesn't, honestly, we do not care if you are happy without even running a window manager. If all of your windows are placed programmatically, sounds good to us. That's great.
Yeah.
Whatever. Don't care.
Yeah, I guess the bottom line here is that it's people can be extremely pedantic in their distro, and they can try to force their opinion on others, and it's over the top. It's the PC Master Race thing started off, and that's an elitist community as well. And most of it's parody, and sometimes it gets a little over the top. I feel like when we talk about the Linux community, it's not so much parody. A lot of it maybe started off as a joke, like, "Oh, you should be using this, or you should be using this," but it just turned into a thing where you do get ridiculed unless you're installing Gentoo or Sabian or Arch and running like the correct if XFCE, if you're doing an environment, and what's the correct window manager? I don't know, i3 or something like that you have to be running. So
i3 is pretty neat. I mean, let's not. If it's like a bunch of people standing around a construction site and they're like, "Hey, check out my tool belt, check out my hammer." That's fine. That's a perfectly awesome attitude to have. If you've written some sort of clever script that does something and it's like, hey, I've done this thing to automate my window manager. That's cool. Show us. And maybe that's something I'll adopt and add to my workflow. But it's not this attitude. I don't know where it comes from. It's really odd. Information sharing is what the internet's about, but you can be information sharing without also being judgmental. It's so weird.
I use a DeWalt screwdriver, and if you use a Black & Decker, you're an idiot. You're a freaking idiot. See, that's what it sounds like. The bottom line is here, what are you getting done? Are you just yelling and screaming about what distro that you're using, or are you just yelling and screaming that other people are idiots because they're not using the same distro, because they're not doing the same things that you're doing, their desktop is not correct or some, up to your standards? Is that all you're doing with Linux? Are you just using it as a platform to provide yourself with some piece of, worth that's more than others out there? Are you just using it as a tool to be an elitist snob, or are you actually getting something done with it? Are you bettering yourself? Are you learning how to use it? Are you learning programming? Are you possibly trying to get a job as an IT consultant in a company? Are you working on open source projects? Are you working on your own software projects? Are you creating apps? What are you doing? That's all that matters. You guys are scaring people away, and that's bad for Linux as a whole. I know you don't want the community to get too big. It's like those people who are afraid their band is going to get too big and then they're going to suck. Well, Linux getting too big, it's not going to be that way. It's not going to change the sound of Linux. It's not going to suck if it gets too big. If anything, there'll be more people using it and more people contributing code to it. It's not like a band that gets signed by a label where the label has the say, and after they get so big, they're like, oh, now we have to appeal to the pop market, and that's here. This is a community thing. That's hence the way open source works. So the bigger it gets, the more people will be contributing, the more stuff will be available, the more applications will be available. And then, some of the bigger software companies may look at this and be like, oh, Linux is becoming a big thing. So as long as the snobbish elitist mentality exists, it's going to exclude a lot of people and keep them from coming over to the platform.
If I could butcher a joke from one of the Austin Powers movies, it's like the only things I can't stand are people that are intolerant of other people's distros and the people who use Gentoo. No, I'm just kidding. It's a joke. I'm really, as John Delancey says, don't provoke the Borg. It's fine. Gentoo's perfectly fine. But
I remember when I first met Kane, that was all he used was Gentoo.
And now Sabian, Sabian is really nice, except if you mix source and precompiled binaries, and then you've crossed the streams, and suddenly every molecule in your body is accelerated to the speed of light, and it's bad news bears. There's a really great video. If none of this is making any sense to you at all, there's a really great video that probably sums it up, at least part of the psychology of it, better than we are, which is called Linux Sucks. And if you haven't seen it, you should totally go see it. It's a great video. He goes into why Linux sucks, but not to spoil it for you. Actually pause it, go watch it, and then come back. But
it's like 40 minutes long, right? You have to have about 40 minutes free.
So I'm going to totally spoil it for you, and that is Linux is about choice, and you have a choice of everything, and so you can totally do anything that you want to do as long as you're willing to invest the time in doing it. And sometimes you just need to get work done, and other times it's like, I want to work the most efficient way possible. And so just because somebody works a little different, I should not have to tell you guys this, but just because somebody works differently than you guys do doesn't mean they're wrong, or doesn't mean that they're doing something wrong. You can share what you're doing with them, and that's good. And if there is a misunderstanding, then yeah, you can sort of point that out. But there are, us included, absolutely us included, but there are a lot of people out there that are like, this is how it is, and it's like, well, no, not quite. That's not exactly what the reality is, or that's not exactly how things are. And we're going to get it wrong, but there are a lot of people out there that get it wrong. Honestly, my biggest fear is that I'm going to be the guy that put something on the internet that should never be on the internet. You know how when you're reading through things on the internet and you read something and it's like, wow, that's the dumbest thing I've ever read? My fear, being that guy. It's like somebody's going to read something, he's like, wow, that guy's a moron. It's like, I don't want to be that guy. That's really bad. And so,
after some of the stuff I put online, I don't think you have anything to worry about. All I'm thankful for is that is that YouTube did not exist when I was 12 years old. Because if YouTube was around when I was 12, some of the idiot stuff I was videotaping with our little VHS camcorders, throwing each other off balconies and I don't know, having watermelon fights. I don't even know what the hell we did. It was awful, and it would probably have ruined my career. So I'm very glad, and I feel so bad for all the 12-year-olds right now who have YouTube accounts, and when they get to, you know, be like 25 or 30 and they really want to do something interesting, they're going to be like, oh man, I've already screwed my life up because of this YouTube account I started when I was 12.
Never going to get into college because of this thing that I've done with Linux. And it's like, what? What?
Oh, God.
What? It's like, well, the entire, all of /G is berating me. I think I'm going to go and jump off a cliff or something. And it's just like, no, why? This is not Linux. The thing that's exciting about Linux psychologically is because it puts you so close to the machine. It's an operating system where you can feel the heartbeat of the machine. You know exactly what it's doing. The machine is operating guaranteed with no hidden agenda, no nothing. You are in touch with the machine, and it's almost a religious experience because it works so well. Now, that said, if you want to play games and you want to do other stuff, you can totally do that. Not as well on Linux, although 20 or 25% of the Linux catalog, or the game catalog of Steam, is available on Linux at this point. But it's not an all or nothing thing. Linux does not force you to be in a committed relationship, as it were. Apple definitely does everything it can to corner you into a committed relationship. It's like, oh, you got an iPhone? It'll work better with a Mac.
Yeah.
Oh, you got a Mac? Oh, you need Apple TV. You need iTunes.
They're really the
stuff.
overly attached girlfriend. That's Apple for you.
Google would also like to be your overly attached girlfriend, and Microsoft is just now figuring that out, and so they're going down that road too. And Linux is very, hippie, sort of kind of, free love in a good way.
Free love without the STDs.
Yeah.
maybe a couple, depending on what you're messing around with, but
And so if you take nothing else away, take away that yes to information sharing, no to belittling. Let's be grown-ups. Let's not, just because somebody uses Ubuntu. I mean, those of you that are like, oh, you should totally use Sabian because Ubuntu is terrible. And I was like, well, okay, because you're using Sabian and it is so much better than Ubuntu. Really? Don't you have a responsibility to use Ubuntu and make it better for everybody? Aren't you taking the easy way out using Sabian because, Ubuntu still exists and it's still terrible for everyone, and you really should improve, Ubuntu and make Ubuntu better. I mean, really, isn't that what you have to do? I mean, isn't that the sort of, I don't want to say hipster thing to do, but I mean, isn't that really what you're advocating? I think it is.
Yeah, now you're just trolling them, but now that you're right, they're gonna have to go use Ubuntu now because it's the distro that is the most popular.
Easy.
And if they hate it so much, they better go fix it.
It's too easy to use Sabian. You've got to use, you've got to improve the status quo with the worst Linux that there is. I mean, come on.
Yeah, and
not
I'm
that I
using
believe
Ubuntu
that Ubuntu is the worst Linux.
No, I'm actually using it because it has the most support and it's got the largest community. So I'm not a pro when it comes to Linux. I'm jumping in, and I'm not going to pretend to be a pro and pretend to get up here and make a bunch of tutorial videos and that sort of thing. But I mean, let's really stand back and look at this. Eric S. Raymond is using Ubuntu. So every time you make fun of Ubuntu or talk down to people who are using Ubuntu, you just remember that you have code from Eric S. Raymond in your freaking pocket. And I guarantee you your code, well, unless you're, Linus Torvalds or somebody like that, maybe a few of you, but most of you out there do not have code that's sitting in everyone's pocket. No matter what, distro or OS you're on. So just think about that next time you start belittling that stuff. It's all about what you get done.
It honestly doesn't matter as long as you're getting work done and contributing back. And, contributing by negative reinforcement does not help anybody. And it's sort of weird, because it's sort of the OSS is about elevating everybody by sharing everything. And so saying this is wrong or you don't do that, there's more diplomatic ways to do that. I mean, if somebody is saying that, the terminal is not the terminal, or that a package manager is not a package manager, or there's 12 package managers on Debian, or something that's completely nonsensical and in left field, you can diplomatically deal with that. You don't have to be a douche. So we may be jumping the gun here a little bit. There was a little bit of this on our own forums, but really what prompted this was the Linux help guy, which is a pretty neat guy. He's just stopped doing this, and it's just because of the trolls. And their videos really didn't get a lot of hits. The videos weren't bad. It was the Linux help guide. He's like, let's install this distribution and walk through it. And there have been a couple other Linux channels now, because it's just troll overload on YouTube, and that's probably just YouTube. But these guys are like, this community is kind of toxic. I'm just not going to post anything to the internet anymore. And it's like, well, can't say I blame you.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the best thing we could do is we're acknowledging this one time. I'm not going to come back and acknowledge this issue over and over again. I'm probably going to just exist as if that part of the community does not exist. I'm not going to re-comment. I'm not going to try to argue with them on the internet. If you guys jump in and say your distro is better and I'm an idiot, I'm just going to block you on Twitter. I don't care. All I care about is, hey, I wrote this piece of code. Would you like to fork it? Man, I'll fork it all night long.
It was Jeff Lennox Turner was the other guy.
Jeff Lennox Turner.
Yeah, his channel, and he sort of talked about the Linux guy and some of the other stuff. But the other slightly less egalitarian thing, the reason we did this is because we would ask you guys to be as nice and diplomatic as possible, and shut down the trolls when you see them, kill them with kindness, basically. Like, oh, blah, blah, i3. And it's like, well, i3 is not necessarily for everybody, or i3 is a neat window manager, or i3 has its place, or I really like i3. Honestly, I don't know why it's not on all of my systems. Laziness, I guess. It's on some of them, but not. I haven't gotten around to it. And so,
well, if you're not using it, you're dumb. And
yeah, clearly.
Yeah.
And so it's up to you guys. It's up to you guys, our loyal fans, to the way that trolls spread trollishness, you guys are gonna have to spread love and cheer. I don't know. You're gonna have to be the Care Bears of the Linux community. I don't know what to tell you.
All right, well, I'm gonna edit this together.
Grumpy Care Bear? I could be Grumpy Care Bear. I could totally do that. Last time I saw Care Bears was when I was like 7, so it's probably gotten mixed up with like He-Man or some other cartoon. It's just bad.
I don't know. I don't even care bears.